Faith is a science teacher at a Christian high school in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she teaches physics and astronomy. So what were you up to in 2009?
I was alive.
Okay,
I was a sophomore in college, studying both astronomy and religion, and starting to work through some of these questions of science and faith.
Okay, and what was your journey like through these issues?
I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up going to a non-denominational church and Christian schools all through my elementary through high school years. And through that time, science and evolution in particular was never directly discussed, but I certainly absorbed a sense of conflict, and that this was something that we just didn't believe and we didn't talk about. My primary exposure to evolution as a high school was a video that I remember that just said, you don't need to know what evolution is, but here are the gotcha questions. Here are the things to say to disprove an evolutionist. And I remember thinking to myself in high school, why couldn't it be that evolution was the mechanism through which God created? That seemed reasonable to me, but I looked around and nobody was offering that as a possibility. And so my high school self said, well, clearly there must be a good reason why we're not considering that as an option. So, there must be something I don't know. But the tenor of the debate really turned me off the question. I decided to table it for a later time.
Yeah. But eventually, you did some work with some science and faith organizations.
I did. I went to college with a passion for astronomy, trying to avoid the evolution issue because it just seemed a little bit too hot, too tense. And turns out in astronomy, you need to talk about the age of the universe as well. And
yep.
Go figure. But I also had a passion for my faith, and I felt that I had been raised in a wonderful Christian home and had been very supported, but also had a sense that I had been surrounded by all people who believed the same things as I did and presented a very homogenous view of the world. And so when I went to college, I wanted to explore what other people believed and why. And so I studied religion on the one hand and also astronomy, and loved both of them, but didn't really want to talk about the interaction between the two for fear of it getting a little bit too complicated. But when I graduated college, I wound up with an internship at NASA doing education work, and my pastor said, I think there's this astronomer, her name's Jennifer Wiseman, I think. She's at the office next door to you. You should have lunch with her and just talk about being a faith and being a Christian in the sciences. And before I knew it, I was working with Jennifer at the AAAS on the Dialogue of Science, Ethics, and Religion. And I have fallen in love with the discussion and found that science has been not a source of weakness in my faith, but a source of strength and something that's helped me to learn more about God and grow in my faith. And BioLogos and many other organizations have been incredible resources through that process.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So for people in your generation, what is it about BioLogos that's valuable to you?
The thing that first struck me about BioLogos was the tenor of the conversation, and the humility to know that these are hard questions and they're not easy answers, and that it's okay to get your hands dirty with hard questions and messy answers and to sit in that for a little bit. My sense before had been that you had to have the certainty of a black and white answer, and that was hard to find. And so the ability to have humble discussions, respectful discourse, and to engage with cutting edge science in a meaningful, exciting way appeals to me, and I know appeals to a lot of my peers.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that about the millennial generation, that they really hate strict black and white, that they want that rich discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a hard thing. And there's been a lot of evangelical cultures about certainty, of knowing for sure the right answer. And I know I had that in my growing up. So being willing to embrace empty messiness is quite a transition. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you are a teacher of high school students, and so what are their needs? What are they looking for? As we think ahead to our next 10 years of BioLogos, how can we serve them?
When I started as a teacher, one of my primary motivations to be a teacher, especially at a Christian high school, was to give my students an understanding of science that says that they don't have to choose between science and faith. I wanted to give them what I wish that I had in high school at my Christian high school, and I found that students are really eager for this, and they're excited to engage in these questions. I think high schoolers have a really uncanny ability to sniff out hypocrisy and inconsistency, especially in adults. They are looking for it, and they sometimes hear from the church that Christianity is a moral code, that it's all about don't do this and don't do that, and maybe you'll get away. In God's good graces. And so to show them that there's more to faith than these right and wrong, it's very important, don't get me wrong, but and that they can engage in these questions has been exciting and freeing. And so creating a safe place in my classroom where they get to ask hard questions and be free to engage has been really valuable. And they are capable of engaging in these questions really deeply, much more than I think we give them credit for. Yeah. And so I want to be able to prepare them to go out to university or whatever comes after high school, with an ability to navigate hard spiritual questions, whether it's science and faith or otherwise. The ability to know what they believe and why, and have those skills for dialogue, I think are really valuable.
Oh, yeah. I visited Faith at her school about a year ago and could tell this wonderful rapport she has with her students, and the impact she's already had in her school, prompting them to think more about how they talk about origins and what the approach of the whole school is going to be. So that's really wonderful. Mm-hmm. So your school is right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. So that is, when I've been out there, everybody says it's like the most secular place in the country, very science and tech oriented. Mm-hmm. So what is that sort of community looking for? What kinds of questions should we be addressing? How can we serve them?
I think one of the big things is just that Christian faith can be intellectually rigorous, that we're not afraid of these questions, whether it's science and faith related or otherwise, that Christians are willing to engage with culture and science and technology. And that science and technology move so fast, especially in the Bay Area. There's a new app every day. And so I think what Christianity has to offer is we need to be nimble enough to engage and respond to these new things that are happening in science and technology and culture, but also have a deep grounding to bring some perspective to those conversations as well. And I think that's something that the Christian faith can offer that Silicon Valley could benefit from. And I think, just to model thoughtful discourse and engage in those science questions.